Hey, greetings. I love Black people family. Thank you for joining us once again. Your host, Sinclair Skinner. We have a great show today. Have some amazing guests who are going to be talking about reparations. And as you know, this show is really focused on the global Black agenda and how that meets revolutionary innovation. We have many problems that have been old, and we need new ways of solving them. And my background is in engineering. I attended Howard and Tuskegee University. So many of the people that we discuss these issues with, we'll be looking at it as best as we can from a critical and analytical perspective, really tied to how do we innovate and how do we kind of develop better ways and new ways to approach these issues and solve them for ourselves. As we see this past week, we've had a change of administrations, and it's such a blessing to see our sister Kamala Harris become vice president, and the opportunity for us to continually show our political maturity by being the decisive and one of the most powerful constituents in the United States as Black people in determining outcomes of elections, as we've seen in Georgia as well. But we also know that's not enough, that at the end of the day, that we have to solve our own problems. No one's going to come save us. As we see with the continuation of the COVID disaster and pandemic, we lost a great one, good brother, Hank Aaron, who literally a few weeks ago was actually on the media touting the need to take the vaccine, and he was actually taking the vaccine and actually passed away recently. We have to be very vigilant and be skeptical at the same time. We have to create the solutions. So with this show, we're really diving into reparations so that we understand what work needs to be done, but we're not waiting for anyone. As we address these issues, we know that there's a responsibility that we all have to make the change that we want to see, and to wake up every morning and hold ourselves accountable for that change. So thank you so much for joining us on this journey, and know that the purpose of this is to empower each and every one of the folks that are listening to my voice to take action for themselves. Thank you. I am because we are. Let's get this show started.
Today's episode of I Love Black People on Howard University Radio Voices on Sirius XM 141 is brought to you by The Global Green Book, a Black survival guide. The Global Green Book, available on Amazon and iloveblackpeople.com.
All right. Welcome to I Love Black People, and thank you all for coming on. And today we got some amazing guests that really have really a lot to say about the core of why we even have this show, where we're literally talking about the global Black agenda and how it meets revolutionary innovation. And in that agenda, we have to make our own priorities. We have to decide for ourselves what's important. And we have two guests today that are going to come and talk about reparations. We have our sister Dreisen Heath, and our good brother, my brother, who I've been knowing for so long, brother Jeremiah Chapman. Thank you both for coming on the show. I appreciate you taking time out. Sister Dreisen, could you give the folks a little bit something about yourself before you take us on this masterful journey on reparations?
Thank you so much, Brother Sinclair. I really appreciate us having this conversation and, making the space for us to talk about this. I'm Dreisen Heath, as Brother Sinclair introduced. I work at Human Rights Watch on domestic issues, primarily racial justice issues, but heading up our reparations work, reparative justice work at the local level, particularly supporting the local movement in Tulsa to secure reparations for the few living survivors and descendants of the 1921 race massacre, but reparations also more broadly for the Black community, given the ongoing impacts of the massacre on the community and the pervasive inequality the Black community is facing. in addition to supporting this ongoing movement, this movement that has existed for decades to push for a national reparations plan for descendants of enslaved Africans in the U.S. So very much oriented to protect and defend our people, and looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, sister. That was a lot. And thank you for your work. If I don't remember to say that before this is over, thank you, sister, humbly. And Brother Jeremiah, can you give us a little bit on you and some of the amazing work that you continue to do and literally making it possible for this show and this episode to air with talent and amazing people. Thank you humbly.
Absolutely. My name is Jeremiah Chapman. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Culture Weekly. My work around reparations is really supporting a lot of what Dreisen and the rest of the, particularly the HR 40 Coalition is doing. And so the HR 40 Coalition, of course, is supporting Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee in trying to ensure that particular bill passes. I think we really made some waves in the previous Congress, and garnering over I believe it was over 150 different co-signers to the bill. And so now it's about really trying to figure out how to better message to Black folks, to non-Black folks, but particularly, of course, to Black folks about what reparations is, what it entails, and just kind of the mechanics around, what it's going to take to see that happen and to see that realized. And so, just really excited to work with you all, as well as Dreisen, obviously, and really demystifying this issue for our community. And making it as imaginative as possible.
Well, all right. Well, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. Sister Dreisen, I mean, just to share with the audience, when they hear reparations, where do you start from? And again, talk to us in a way, because in many ways I might think I know. So in a real way, can you break down, reparations? Take us through, the whys, through some of the hows. I think that would be very helpful. And Sister, what we got, Sister Dreisen?
Great. So you said the whys, and the whys for people, for Black people in the U.S. is, our Black people's experience is directly synonymous with the past being present day. History isn't history; it's still playing out before us, because the legacy of slavery and its impacts are as evident as ever before, continually exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis. And so you can't begin a conversation about repair without starting from the origins, the inhumane, dehumanizing, oppressive, brutally violent system and institution of slavery. Within that institution, you have crimes and you have harms that have gone on for generations, mental health and trauma impacts that people are still experiencing today. But even outside of the institution, you freed the enslaved people, but life doesn't get better. And that you go from the institution of slavery directly into institutions of legalized segregation, Black codes, and other nuisance laws for basic, everyday kind of right to life movements and free movement being inhibited by laws that are now saying, okay, you're not actually free. We just released one of your shackles. And this institutions begin to build out of the institution of slavery. You have, again, state and local policies dictating legalized conditions that make white life and Black life different. You also have the institution of policing that evolves out of the institution of slavery, this massive surveillance and racially discriminatory system that is there to patrol and put Black people social control and put them back in their place, and also jail and arrest people that support their freedom, including a number of the white abolitionists, for instance, were some of the first arrests of these policing institutions for teaching enslaved people how to read, or newly freed people how to read. So you have those harms, but then you have the harms of the 19th and 20th centuries. Federal policies designed to make the conditions of life in Black communities unfair and unsafe. Conditions ranging from lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to adequate education, transportation routes, basic human rights are being denied continually. It's an ongoing violation on Black communities. So in terms of, how we're evolving to now, those impacts still exist. And you're seeing, again, it played out and exacerbated through COVID, but also through every economic and social corner, given that this economy was built off of the backs of enslaved people.
Now, how do we go from those realities to actually conversations about reparations, which is actually, like you mentioned, I think before we started, is a legal designation, and it's something accepted internationally, one. And then two, some of the remedies that have been done in other cases of such crimes against humanity and atrocities against peoples. How do we talk about remedies from that point? And then maybe as we go from there, drill down specifically to this case and what's going on right now, please.
Absolutely. And thank you for framing it like that, because you always need to define exactly what you're going to embark on. And reparations is a specialized process that centers the people impacted, that centers the victims and the survivors. There is no repair without consultation with the community. So if a government is drawing up a plan for repair and reparations and you aren't a part of the conversation, that's the issue. There will not be an effective reparations plan. International law defines repair in 5 different categories. You have restitution, which restores communities back to a morally acceptable place before a violation has occurred, before harm has occurred. You have compensation, which is monetary payment for economically accessible damage. This ranges from, it can even cover moral losses and losses of opportunity. You also have rehabilitation. You need psychological and legal services to support your way through recovery of generations of trauma and human suffering. Satisfaction measures, which are the memorials, the markers. Tell me what happened in this place. Who was lynched in this place? Telling that kind of raw history. What has happened in this space and place and time that we are not acknowledging today. And then you have guarantees of non-repetition, which is basically institutional reform. Some institutions don't function to protect Black people. How do we reimagine those institutions? And so these are the 5 layers of reparations. We've seen that play out internationally and nationally into actual plans for people. In the 40s, you had the Indian Claims Commission produced by the federal government, gave very small payments to Native Americans. It was an inadequate process, and it was money, $1,000 checks, $1,200 checks placed into corporate bonds, which people didn't have control over that money, actually. However, they did embark on the process, the federal government. In the 80s, 1988, the Civil Liberties Act passes, which provides redress for Japanese Americans and others who were interned and relocated during World War II. There were $20,000 payments made to over 80,000 recipients and families, and as well as other benefits. You have more famous reparations programs that are recognized, such as Germany's program, which covers all walks of life, really. It provides Holocaust survivors and victims' families with compensation, but also trips back to their place of origin, healthcare benefits, end of life care, education benefits. So you also have those like investments in the social life for people to thrive. And currently, even recently, recipients, Holocaust survivors and their families went back to the government and said, we need added relief for COVID-19. And the German government paid out billions of dollars in addition to its already existing reparations program. So we know that governments, should know they have a full obligation and responsibility to repair harms that they have perpetuated and designed, and they have to do so proportional to the harm. So, that's where we are today with HR 40, as Jeremiah
Whoa, before you even go, that was cold blood. Like what you just said, folks be talking this like off the cuff stuff, which is great. This is like, look, let's just discuss what humanity is about and what time it is. Like you gave the time like down to the second. It is 7:30. Jeremiah, she gave the clock. God bless you, sister. Woo.
I don't have anything necessarily to top that, but the context, I think that always gets me, or the time period, of course, is that like Reconstruction period, that period right after, slavery is quote unquote ended, I'll say. And we see the Freedmen's Bank and the Freedmen's Bureau, and they really take advantage, obviously, of Black folks. And it's literally like this, like crazy, like the same way information in today's society with Facebook and being able to have all these different consumer points on people was the same way that they used the Freedmen's Bank and the Freedmen's Bureau, to where they knew everything from down to someone's complexion to how many kids they had and how much money they had and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden in 1872, 1874, it's non-existent. And I think 60% of Black folks' wealth at that time, just pretty much vanishes in the thin air, or really just ends up in someone else's bank account. And so for me, that historical context, to kind of add on to what Dreisen mentioned in terms of the other accounts of reparations, but more so for me, I guess the reason for reparations, I feel like it's very, we can just look outside today or look on the news today and see obviously the effects and the ongoing effects of slavery and white supremacy. But I think the thing that's always like really confounded me from a historical standpoint is that Freedmen's Bank and that Freedmen's Bureau period of time that I think a lot of people either don't know about or they've heard about, and they don't realize how egregious it was. And so that's really the only thing I think I'd had from a historical standpoint. I think Dreisen's a much bigger student to history than I am. But as I mentioned,
that's helpful though. I think to add that layer, like I like this like as a jazz thing, like we're all adding a little riff. Now she putting that bass line, but that driving us through, and then even the piece that you just added with the context of how, as much as we did these things to move forward, there's somebody pulling us back institutionally. And I think we definitely lose sight that we went from 0 to 100 very quickly. And I've even had people say that even our allies didn't know that we were going to go from 65 to where we went to in 1875 so quickly. Like what we did in such a short period of time is really phenomenal. And we don't get to hear that. And then they literally come back and like do some real draconian institutional things to take these people just brand new with these opportunities and whoop them. And I even try to draw it because I think it's important what Dreisen said about the continuity of this. My parents came from a segregated environment. I'm 51. That whole Gen X in 1969, I was born. My brother and I were some of the first kids to integrate some schools. And after all that went through in the civil rights, my parents were told, hey, we're going to give these people one more chance. They said that they really want to open up and make this a better world. And they offered me and my brother and sisters to this new society full of racism. My brother, and when we came of age, we ended up coming into a thing called the crack epidemic. You know what I'm saying? Then AIDS. Like my dad gave me the birds and the bees. He didn't know it was going to be a life or death conversation. So literally the things that we ran into after we made peace with the civil rights, okay, we got everything set up. We're going to just make this better. Offer your children. They offered up the best and brightest of their children to this system. And this system came back with mass incarceration. So I think the fact that y'all both are actually talking about this continuity thing that we really got to address, I think it's very powerful that you put it in context of other people who've literally gone through some of these things, and that there's a institutional way to address for redress. Let's spend that last 5 on where we are with the bills that are out there, maybe even conversations. Some people said that in the executive orders, there was not one thing on there about the reparations. How do we look at this where we are in this moment, Sister Dreisen, as you bring us home humbly?
Yeah, we're in a moment of continual reckoning, but reckoning does not serve well for the liberation and the continuation of people if it's only lip service. So we need action. We need to begin this journey for repair, and it starts it started a long time ago, but the movement for Black Lives has fueled the reparations movement. The legacy reparations groups like NARC and NCOBRA have been on the ground working over decades for this promise to be realized. Remember, we had 150 years ago, we had a promise of 40 acres and a mule. They didn't give it to us. Instead, they paid white slave owners in DC reparations, and they turned a blind eye to us, but depend on us to carry the electorate to victory in certain circumstances. So what does that actually look like? Well, HR 40 has been a bill that's floated around the chambers for 31 years. It gained unprecedented momentum last year, 173 co-sponsors. A Senate companion was introduced last year, the first bill since Reconstruction, first reparations bill to be introduced since Reconstruction. So times are changing. Members are recognizing that too, although there's a long way towards education, because reparations is not ordinary public policy, and you need increased investments in social welfare and other programs and social support programming, and you need reparations to close the equity gap. It's not an either or, it's both. So this bill would establish an expert commission to examine the legacy of slavery. So not just the past institution of slavery, segregation, and but thereafter as well, the continuing impacts. And there's unprecedented momentum for this. There are more members on this bill than ever before. There's also a Biden and Harris administration who pledged in their Lift Every Voice Black America plan that they would study reparations. So there's also a concurrent effort here, not only legislatively, because the bill HR 40 has never passed out of the Judiciary Committee in its 31-year span of life. And we shouldn't be having issues and controversy over a study bill and recommendations, because this bill, the commission would come up with recommendations for every area of economic and social turmoil that Black people are experiencing. And so Biden has made this pledge to have Black people's back, to study reparations, yet we haven't seen that prioritized within the first 100 days. And you can't upend systemic racism. You can't end white supremacy without talking about reparations, without talking about the harms of white supremacist violence on the Black community for decades and centuries. And so that's where we are today, with building up a coalition to support this work, to support closing equity gaps, to support just a repair process. When you break a limb, you need surgery, you need rehab. If you don't complications are going to go to the rest of your body. Black people have been experiencing additional complications of racism for decades and centuries, and it's time to stop that bleeding.
Okay, so what do we do to help? Like, I think, since I almost got a little, I mean, you were so like thorough. And I just wonder why generationally we don't see amazing young people like you and do, whatever we can to be supportive. I know you were at Human Rights Watch, but we should give you a big pile of money and resources. And I know them folks ain't no smarter than you. I mean, you were so brilliant on this issue. What do we need to help? I don't know if I'm getting off topic. We got a few minutes here. I want to know what we can do specifically as an audience to help make sure this legislation or executive order, whatever they need to do in 100 days, how we amplify the urgency. And then maybe 20 seconds on, like, if you had your dream of what you could get as resources, what would you do? Because we have people on this that are listening to the show, are powerful, Black loving people who want to just give you everything to Sister Dreisen to make this stuff happen right now.
Yeah. So, right, we need reparations now. And it starts with, on the legislative end, calling your local representatives, but also representatives that aren't in your jurisdiction. If you see somebody that's not on the HR, not co-sponsoring the HR 40 bill, and its Senate companion will be introduced in the coming weeks, you need to get them on the bill. There needs to be pressure on all areas of the political spectrum to make this a priority. There should be mass organizing to make reparations visible. It's no longer a taboo word. Press the administration, host discussions, carry forth, tell the truth about what's going on. Host discussions about the ongoing impacts and why repair is necessary. But also link up with other organizations and groups that are doing this work. Link up with the legacy reparations groups. We need a massive campaign, media campaign, a corporation campaign to say that all sectors invest in the well-being of Black folks. And it has to reach to every corner.
Well, thank both of you for joining us and giving us so much information. We really appreciate it. This is the first one, but we're going to continue this discussion to make sure that we liberate our people and that make sure that the reparations is first and foremost in everyone's mind. And again, thank you all for joining us today. I am because we are. Thank you so much for what you've given. Thank you.